Hey guys, Mr. Klein here, and we're talking in our second lesson of our chapter on Chinese history. We're going to talk about the Zhou dynasty and some of the major ideas in Chinese history. So let's go ahead and let's get started. The last lesson, we were talking about the Shang dynasty, which was the first dynasty that we have a historical record for. And it came to an end in the 1100s BC when the Zhou dynasty came charging in from western China. Now, these guys weren't from the river civilizations, the Yangtze or Yellow Rivers, so as a result, the Chinese people, the Chinese civilization that they took over, really distrusted them. But having said that, the structures that the Zhou set into place allowed the Zhou dynasty to last for almost 800 years, the longest running dynasty in Chinese history. So let's look at the Zhou dynasty pretty much at its height. We have this area, this is the Two River Civilizations up here in northern China. And they came from out west in this area and migrated in, invaded, and took over. Now, Chinese people generally don't like outsiders from their sphere of influence historically. So the Zhou were considered outsiders and they didn't trust them. So having these new kings around and with all of these nobles that the Shang dynasty set up in our pyramid in our last lesson led to a lot of distrust. And so the Zhou rulers wanted these nobles to rule for them. So in order for this to happen, they set up a system where lords were given land to rule and it was theirs and the Zhou kings gave it to them. And in exchange, these nobles gave loyalty and military assistance. And this is what we'd call feudalism, which we'll talk in more detail when we talk about medieval Europe. But some of the first ideas of feudalism actually popped up in ancient China about 2,000 years before it was in Europe. And as a result, peasants or farmers with small farms were given this land that the Zhou kings gave the lords, and in exchange, they had to give up some of the crops in order to have the nobles receive in order to sell and gain wealth. And it created a system of interdependence, and that's really what the feudal system was. So for this long stretch of time, China was really a feudal system where you had peasants living on the land, and their lives were completely at the whim of the lords that owned the land. And the lords were given land to rule in exchange for loyalty from the king that ruled them. But by the end of the Zhou period, lords fought each other across China during the Warring States period, which was a 50 to 60 year period of fighting. And in Chinese historical movies, you see, including films made in the last 5 years, some big budget movies talking about the Warring States period. And you have different generals fighting each other and things like that. So that's how the Zhou dynasty fell apart. And here's some artwork from the Zhou dynasty, some pottery right here made from bronze. And bronze artwork and bronze materials was really what the Zhou dynasty was all about in terms of crafts. Now, 800 years of history, a lot of things happened, but the main stuff we want to talk about are three big ideas. The main one was the ideas based on the most influential teacher in Chinese history, which is Confucius. No, he wasn't confusing. His name was Confucius. And he lived near the end of the Zhou dynasty. But his ideas are still felt today in China. He taught that China, even today, remember 1.3 billion people, China has a lot of people. And in China, problems get really big because they have big problems. For example, we have problems in Chinese history of famine. Okay, well, people going hungry isn't really good. But in China, famine often includes hundreds of millions of people going hungry. So as a result, if there's a problem in China, it's usually really big. And if you have big problems, you need to cut them off really soon and minimize their impact. So as a result, it really matters to the Chinese people that you live in order and you follow the rules and you do stuff like that. Because if people go off doing their own things and not care about other people, you end up with big problems, as you see later on in Chinese history. And he said that order in society comes from ethics, which are moral values and not laws. In other words, Confucius thought that if people lived by right teachings and they didn't need to follow laws if they just always knew what to do with the right thing. So instead of constantly fighting about laws, Confucius wanted people to return to the ideas and practices from older times. That's what Chinese society was built on, and so that's how China should be governed. And this is a about 1400-year-old portrait of Confucius wearing traditional clothes, traditional beard, and things like that. And the teachings of Confucius led to a kind of religion, philosophy, all in one kind of thing that we call Confucianism. And Confucianism, as I say, is the system of beliefs based on Confucius's teachings. And it's been considered a guiding force in human behavior and religious understanding in China ever since. In other words, Confucianism, people do religious rituals and stuff for Confucianism, but it's not really considered a religion. It's more of a way of explaining human behavior. And Confucianism is based on 5 main ideas. Okay? The first is Ren, or giving to others, and that a good person should always be giving to others and thinking of others. The next is Yi, the desire to do good instead of evil. That humans have the choice of doing good and evil, and that Confucianism means that people should do good instead of evil. The third idea is Li, or behaving properly at all times, having good manners, speaking when you're supposed to, not doing anything to gain too much attention or anything like that. Zhao is really important. It's respecting one's elders and parents. And that there's 5 different relationships between rulers and subjects, and fathers and sons, husbands and wives, siblings and elders and younger people, and that you should always respect your elders and your parents. And so the subject should always respect the king because that's what they're supposed to do. But at the same time, there's also the idea of zhong, or being loyal to others. That you should always be loyal and be a person of your word and do what you're supposed to for the people who care for you and vice versa. So this works for all of society. So it's not just people doing what they need to do, it's also the ruler doing what he's supposed to do. The ruler should give to others, desire to do good, behave properly, respect his elders, and being loyal to his subjects. And so that's one of the main big ideas that come out of the Zhou dynasty. And the next two kind of contrast each other. Around the time of Confucianism was the Taoism, which stressed living in harmony with the guiding force of reality, or the Tao. Or sometimes you see it with a T, or Taoism. But it's more of a religion than Confucianism, and it was founded by a thinker called Lao Tzu. And this is a portrait of Lao Tzu right here. And he believed that nature and humanity was kind of one and the same. In other words, they were kind of, one was not greater than the other. And they believed that people should be like water and let things flow naturally. So as a result, you shouldn't get in the way of groups of people and things like that, but you should live in harmony. You should work all together and work to be able to flow naturally. Now, in contrast to Taoism, there was an idea of legalism, or legalist believed that society needed strict laws to keep people in line. And they believed that people were evil by nature. And Han Fei is considered to be one of the greatest early legalists. And he lived after the time of the Zhou dynasty, but his writings are kind of a summary of what the early legalists said. And he essentially believed that leaders should understand that people are evil at heart, and so they should create laws. And everybody, because everyone is evil, should follow these laws. And that the leader should rule not because he's the leader, that people should believe in him as a person, but they should believe in him and as he's the leader or the king, and people should respect him for that. And also, the ruler should be a bit secretive. So he shouldn't let people learn how to take advantage of him and things like that, because in the end, the law is what people need to follow, because they're evil, and if they don't follow laws, they're going to do bad things. And if they do bad things will happen to China, and lots of people will die. And of the ideas and philosophies going into the next lesson of Taoism and legalism, which both actually take Confucian ideas, the legalists put their ideas into action first in Chinese government and politics. And later on, we would see some Taoism. And we'll see this in the Warring States period, where people took advantage of each other. And next thing you know, you had generals fighting each other, and China was thrown into 50-plus years of chaos. And the legalists said, you know what, we have to create laws, and we have to have strong rulers to rule us, because if not, we're going to have nothing but chaos, and lots of people will die, and we will not have success. So that's our lesson. The Zhou dynasty was the longest-lived dynasty. Ran from around from 1000 to around 200 BC. You had three big ideas come out of it. First is Confucianism, which is the system of beliefs based on the teachings of Confucius. And remember, it's all about living the traditional Chinese ideas of Ren, Li, Yi, Xiao, and Zhang. And then there were two competing philosophies that argued that people should flow in Taoism, and Taoism was founded by Lao Tzu. And on the other hand, there were legalists, which were thinkers who kind of took everything together, like Han Fei here, and he said that people were evil and they needed strict laws and strong rulers in order to rule them. And this kind of came as a result of the Warring States period, which the uh, ended the Zhou dynasty. So there you go. That's your lesson. If you have any questions, please let me know, and thanks for watching.